Our webinar, Bottlenecks to Breakthroughs Process Mining in Government. And now, with further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you your moderator for today's webinar, Robert Shea. Robert, thank you for joining us. Take it away.
Susie, you're fantastic. Thank you for going through all those details, and thank you all for joining us on this very early Wake Up Wednesday. Luckily, we've got an invigorating topic in process mining to get us going today. And we're joined by two of my personal heroes, two people who've made enormous contributions in their careers in public service. Teresa Hunter, former CFO at IRS, currently executive director at MSI, and Sairah Ijaz, who is former CIO at the Housing and Urban Development, currently managing director at Celonis. In a minute, I'll ask him to tell you a little bit more about their background because it's really worth hearing. But let's take the pulse of those who are with us this morning. So where are you today with process mining? And we got 5 choices for you. New to me, I can't explain it yet. It's probably where I was a year ago. Aware, I've heard of it, but haven't explored it. I'm informed, I can explain the basics, and I'm considering use cases. I'm piloting it, you're actually testing it in a couple of processes, or you're operational, you're using it in production across multiple processes. So we'll give you a minute to answer that so we can just take a pulse check of where everyone is. And I still haven't figured out how to have hold music on these things. Okay, it looks like for the most of you, it's new to you. So the vast majority, it's either new to you or you're aware of it. We don't have anybody on board so far who's piloting it or for whom it is operational. So that's great. We're all going to learn a lot together, and we've got 2 incredible people to coach us through that. So Teresa, Sairah, do us all a favor. Give us a little bit deeper introduction of you, your careers, and how you came to be so interested in leveraging a tool like process mining. Sairah, start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Robert. Thanks, AGA, for having us. I think this is probably my second Wake Up Wednesday. I did one a couple of years ago, and I just forgot how early it ends up being. As Robert mentioned, my name is Sairah Ijaz. I am currently the managing director at Celonis, and we are a AI process mining company, a product company. I had 20 years of experience in the federal government. I worked at the Social Security Administration, GAO, HUD, among other agencies that I've worked at. And I think one of the most important things in the course of my career that I realized is there are a lot of very complex processes in the government. There are a lot of rules and legislation that's come down and made things extremely complex. And the people who are working to actually institutionalize those legislations, it's amazing how much expertise and experience people have in making sure that we are able to function as governments in our country. I've now at Celonis, and I'm supporting our federal civilian space, which is basically looking at how to bring process mining to the government. And so I'm excited to be here and part of the conversation. I'll pass this over to Teresa.
Great.
Hey, good morning. Thank you, AGA, for having me. Yeah, this is really early, but who needs coffee when you can talk process mining, right? So it's a very energetic topic. But as Robert mentioned, I was the former CFO for the Internal Revenue Service as my last job. But prior to that, I did CPA by trade, and so I did financial statement audits with KPMG earlier in my career. And then transferred over to government about 15 years ago. Spent some time at GSA, DHS, DOI, and then last, as I mentioned, IRS. So I don't know if that makes me older, it sounds like I job hopped a lot, but anyway, as I get older, I like to think it was job hopping. But anyway, I had a great experience throughout my federal career, and really helping support, like, moving things forward at DHS. I had the privilege of being part of the team that got the first clean audit opinion. So I've always been interested in making things better for government and the accountability around it. And when I was at Interior was when robotic process automation was at the forefront, and it was new to government, and bringing it into our environment. And so we had our first like pilot use case. And then when I transferred over to IRS, I think in the last 6 years, technology has really advanced and matured in so many ways. And so not just bringing RPA into the IRS environment for the CFO office, but also some of the other more advanced technology like process mining and things like that. And so, as you mentioned, I'm with MSI now, so continuing that journey of helping federal agencies modernize and leaning into technology to be more efficient and agile, and transformative so that, we are more efficient for the future of finance.
Great. Thank you both. Great background. I've worked with you both, know you both well, and a lot of great qualities. Cynicism might be one of the qualities I would associate with each of you. So, but in a good way. So talk, it's a great perspective to see, to tell us what you see as the potential in process mining. But you saw from the polling questions where the group stands. So give us some basic background. What is process mining, or process intelligence, and how do you differentiate it from other technologies like robotic process automation, AI, or other developments? Who wants to
Sure.
start?
Oh, sorry.
Who wants
Sorry,
to
Robert.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take that
Okay, great.
question of just of covering what process mining is. If we could go 2 more slides, please. Thank you. So
Perfect slide for a Wake Up Wednesday, by the way.
I'm sure you can read every single word on this slide. Um, no, I think the bigger part of understanding what process mining is at a glance is that everyone has a process that they do in their office, whether it's a procure to pay, it's your receivables process, your payables process. You have a process, and you assume that the process is fairly linear. Everyone kind of knows what's happening, what comes next. But what happens in reality is quite different than what you might expect. And someone may have to re-record something. It was sent to the wrong person, and you need to transfer the recording of a invoice to a different individual. So there are different pieces in a process that actually occur in daily execution of these processes, and that's what process mining kind of gives you. It takes away from the preconceived notion that a process is very clear and linear, and it shows you what's actually happening in reality, but it uses data in order to be able to do that. So, at a very high level, what process mining does is it goes into it's across your applications. It looks across your enterprise, and it pulls three pieces of information. It pulls your an activity, which could be recording of an invoice. It takes a ID, like a unique identifier. It might be the invoice number, and it takes a time date stamp that this occurred on Monday, December 15th, at 8:58 a.m. And it kind of takes that entry and it creates a part of the process. Then it pulls every other part of that process and it kind of generates a digital twin of that process. And it does this across your entire enterprise for every potential process that occurs. So you might have your receivables process, you might have your invoice process, you might have requisition that's going through procurement, and these are all kind of tied together. And then this, what process mining lets you do is kind of pull all that information up visually, see what those processes look like and how they interact with each other. And that's sort of the picture on the right, where you can kind of see there are two different processes happening. There's some loops, some people are having to redo things, but then there's a touch point in the middle where you see those two processes kind of come together. And those are the sort of the high level concepts. But if we go one more slide, I can kind of explain a little bit more about some relevant pieces. So typically when you are like looking at a process, it may be system dependent, right? You might have different perspective on in our general ledger when we record a payable, like this is sort of the process that we follow. It might be very specific to one system. In our procurement system, we might have a requisition and it goes through this process before, we make an award. What process mining allows you to do is take a little step further, and it goes beyond just like looking at one system. It'll let you look across multiple systems. So you become system agnostic and you start seeing how those processes interrelate with each other. At what point does that requisition turn into having a contract with a vendor to them then invoicing you? You have like three separate processes there, but like how do they all kind of tie together? And what does that look like in your enterprise in a visual way? So there's those two things kind of show you sort of how process mining has kind of evolved. But the other kind of important terms to be aware of is there's case-centric process mining, and then there's object-centric process mining. Case-centric would be where you would basically follow like one specific instance, like let's follow the invoice through the process. Object-centric process mining does a little bit different. It lets you kind of look at every perspective around that invoice. Like what requisition did it tie to? What contract does it tie to? It lets you kind of look at different processes that tie into that one object. And that actually offers you a lot more clarity into sort of how meaningful or how much context is around something. If you record a receivable, it's different if it's a receivable related to a loan versus maybe a recapture, or maybe there was an error in a calculation for a grant payment and you need to record a receivable related to that. So that context is important and that kind of helps you understand that context a little bit better. And all of this kind of leads to process intelligence, which is more of like, how do you now take that picture that you've created of your entire organization, this digital twin that you've created of your operations, and how do you look for those bottlenecks? How do you look at where do we need to potentially change our process? Like, let's say we've noticed like 80,000 times someone has had to change, someone has received an invoice and it went to the wrong person and we should have sent it to someone else. And so it has to be rerouted to someone else. Like we've had to reroute this 80,000 times. We need to change our process here. Somehow we need to figure out how to get it to the right person at the right time. So it lets you find those things that you might want to fix. So that's where process intelligence comes in. Hopefully that provides sort of just like a contextual background of sort of what is process mining, how does it kind of fit into the picture of operations in CFO areas, or other areas too. Like I didn't mention this, but this isn't just in the CFO area or the financial area. This works for like grants. We've done some work where we looked at grant funding that was provided to a state and, sort of what does that process look like once that funds are received, a grant funding is received, and how do they, actually identify who receives a grant and provides the funds to them. So it can go through a grant activity, go through loan activity, it can go through a financial activity, but there are a number of use cases where this would work.
See, I didn't even need coffee this morning. That was amazing.
Was that riveting? Sorry, I had too much coffee this morning.
No, it
That's
was
what's
great. It
happening.
was great. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. Teresa, do you have a perspective
Yeah.
on this? Like how this
Yeah,
differs
I mean,
from other stuff?
Sarah is the expert in this, and that was a great explanation of what process mining is. And like you, Robert, I learned about process mining a little over a year ago. I had heard the term, but I didn't know exactly what it was. But I saw a demo, about a year ago, like I said, and just the potential that's there. And so, in my simple layman terms, the way that I get my head around what this value and what this actually does. To all my auditor friends out there, when you do a walkthrough of a process and you have to have this sit down with individuals to explain what they do, explain, what documents they look at, what data they look at, and then you kind of, write down all of the processes and, here's the layout of everything. Here's where I've identified the key controls, et cetera, et cetera. Instead of having to do that manual walkthrough of having the conversations and understanding with the individuals, this is really an advanced way of automating that process where you can feed it the information and then you have the ability to have it do an analysis over that information to give you more pinpointing of where your bottlenecks are, where your automation opportunities are, where your process improvements could be. And then that way you have the ability to have more of a data-driven decision making versus, the manual way of like making your assumptions and kind of understanding the process through conversation and documents. This really just, adds a whole nother level of opportunity to really become more efficient and faster.
It really is exciting. I found myself at a fancy dinner Friday night, sitting next to Dave Liebrick, and he couldn't stop talking about how process mining, the opportunities that it provides. So, and all I wanted was another glass of wine. The
Robert, could I add one thing to what
Sure,
Teresa was saying?
sure.
So, when I was at HUD, we were going through our migration of our core financials over to Treasury Arc. We had sessions where we were sitting in rooms doing like our process mapping of like, this is what's going on right now. And we need to figure out, what's going to move over to Treasury, what's going to stay here. And some of that was like subject to who you could get in the room, like who was in the office that day and had the time to sort of like be able to dedicate like 6, 7 hours of sitting in a room to process mapping something out.
Ugh.
And that's so difficult because, what if they forgot something? What if like from their perspective, they didn't encounter every process? And so that's the one thing that this also allows you to do. It gives the data the ability to be able to tell the story versus somebody's memory of like
Yeah,
what happens.
that's a pretty vivid example. And the time it saves is amazing. So the CFO shops across the federal government, at least, have taken some pretty big hits. And so with tighter resources, fewer staff, tighter timelines, give us some specific examples, if you would, about how process intelligence could actually improve performance, or make compliance easier, make things more efficient. You both already shared some of these examples, but are there some others that you think could bring this to life?
I think, oh, sorry, go ahead, Teresa, were you going to go first?
No, go ahead.
I think one of the things that sort of is a reality of the environment today is there's a want to try to use technology to be able to fill some gaps because the individuals that may have known the process for what it was or why we did a certain thing may not be there or available to be able to kind of provide their perspective on these things. And so the ability to be able to use sort of the data in the existing application systems, whether it's like a mainframe or or a more modern platform like a Salesforce or a ServiceNow, whatever is being used in an organization, there's a desire to want to be able to use technology to be able to support some of this, and kind of build forward with it. When you have few resources, you want to make sure you're putting your people where they're needed. And so getting that picture of sort of what your end-to-end process looks like lets you identify, I want to make sure we focus our people here. And this is maybe where I can do an automation or RPA or something like that to be able to kind of take care of this part of the process. But it allows you to kind of make some decisions about where you want to focus your resources.
Teresa?
Yeah, no, I mean, from my perspective, coming from IRS, we are no stranger to knowing what it is to have a tight budget and short staff. So, early on in my days at IRS, quickly realized that, having more staff added to solve problems was not a solution. It just wasn't sustainable. It wasn't in the budget even then, still isn't in the budget. And I've never heard anyone in government say they have too many staff.
Right.
So it's an ongoing problem, but there definitely is opportunity to create efficiency, to figure out, am I utilizing the people that I have to the best use of their ability, and moving away from some of that manual transactional stuff to having more analytical thought around some of the processes, and getting more value out of the work that they have. And with right now, what is it, like over 300,000 federal workers are expected to be leaving the federal government by the end of this year. And that's a significant amount of knowledge and talent that has walked out the door. And pulling on the thread of what Sarah said of, sitting in the room, figuring out what's going and what's staying at HUD versus going to Treasury, having people in the room, like there's a good chance that the person that used to be the go-to that knows everything may not be there anymore in the agency. And so how do you address that lack of having that information or the right person in the room that has that historical knowledge to be able to make the right decisions of what should stay and what goes, right? And so leveraging like the technology, is definitely a solution to be able to really understand and move the process forward with understanding, like, what should be done, what is being done, so that you can make an educated decision based on that information. And when I look at the President's Managed Agenda that came out, which is short and sweet, right? 2 pages. The theme I kind of walk away from, at least on the technology side, is, we're using technology, we're trying to create efficiency, and we want results. And creating that, trio of pulling together of, efficiency and results and immediately, and not having people, having to close that gap between the loss of people. The efficiencies haven't quite been created in the government. And so how do you close that gap? And looking into technology and different tools like Salonis, is a great opportunity to help organizations be able to move forward. The other point, Sarah, that I think is very important, that, many organizations right now are facing consolidation, whether it's a system, consolidation, or it's like operational side of, HR, finance, procurement, whatever the case may be, where you're having to look at all of your processes from end to end. That was very decentralized, whether it's in bureaus or, however it's handled within your organization. But having an understanding of being able to pull all of that together to make one consolidated, centralized process. You have to be able to start somewhere from the foundation, to get that part right if you're going to be efficient and effective in what the consolidation looks like.
Do you have like real examples of where this or other technologies have greatly improved the process, Teresa?
So when I was at IRS, we did actually do a pilot with the procure to pay process. So that's the closest I have as far as experience with dealing with this. And so when I saw the pilot, or the demo of like what process mining was, I was super excited about it. I was very fortunate to have a very innovative group of folks at IRS that was willing to try new things and see, how we could improve our efficiency overall. And so we looked at the procure to pay, like I said. So that's starting from the contract acceptance to the vendor payment. And I will add that, the this, and Sarah, like, chime in here if I'm wrong, but from my experience, the most difficult part of process mining is getting the data, right? So we were looking at 51 different tables within our core financials from AP, from procurement, having CIO procurement, like having like making sure we were getting all of the information correct, in 5 years of data. That was our biggest lift, I think. But once we had the information, the rest of it was pretty smooth and very quick to get an analysis over what the opportunity was, to improve that area. And so we were able to visualize from the as is to, understanding the key metrics along the life cycle. And then with that information, the analysis that it gave us, which, wasn't a shocker that our process was overly complex and it was very inefficient, but it gave us data behind it, right? So we had almost 19,000 different process variations within the procure to pay, with an average process time of about almost 700 days to complete. And so that really highlighted, it's not just in our heads that this is inefficient and complex, but there's, true metrics behind it. And we had a very, very low automation rate of only about 9%. And looking at where our wasted effort was really on low value purchase orders. So for example, like anything under $100,000, we were consuming a disproportionate amount of time on the processing effort. So it only represented about 5% of the total output, but it was consuming so much of the time, which created an imbalance in the resource allocation. So I can attest to the action that was actually taken, because it was before I left, before I had the opportunity to see the end to end of across the finish line. But the opportunity for the actions that we identified was, being able to increase the automation rate. So looking at those low value transactions that were under 100,000, we could increase having automation carry forward for about 80% rate versus the 9% that it was originally at, and then being able to streamline our processes. So looking at the 19,000 variations to dropping that down to 5,000 variations, which 5,000 sounds like a lot still, but it is a complex process, but it is a significant drop, right? And then that would also help decrease the cycle time, as far as the number of days, by about 15%. So, and then the other opportunity was, our value-based processing, right? So looking at it from the standpoint, okay, the low value transactions, we don't really need to have staff focusing the bulk of their time on that. Let me use the, more strategic track for the high value transactions. So that way I can ensure that the right amount of human oversight is applied where it needed to be applied the most. And so anyway, the opportunity is exponential, right? From this is just one process within the CFO office. If I would have had the opportunity to do that across all of my business processes within the the CFO office, the opportunity to be able to flag, identify, automate where I needed to, and then have the data to support the decisions that I was making. It's an extreme amount of opportunity, and it's an exciting tool to be able to, leverage if you have the opportunity to pull that in your environment.
You and I have also had a number of discussions on this topic. You've written about it, that people shouldn't stay within their silos when looking for ways to improve processes, that it's important to collaborate outside with your other stakeholders, the program leadership, other CXOs. Can you talk about how this tool highlights that, the importance of collaboration across the organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think the days of being able to just, sit in your own swim lane and expect things to get done are over. From my perspective, when I was CFO, there wasn't much that I would be able to get done without having IT in the room, right? I really needed to rely on my CIO friends, and embrace that partnership and be able to collaborate with them. And in this example, for example, the involvement of procurement as well, like having the SMEs in the room that understand the business requirements of the
Mhm.
data, the tables, having the right conversations to make sure that we're pulling in the right information and able to be able to move forward with better results. So I think the importance of collaborating across the C-suite with your partners is key in being successful for this type of work. That if we're trying to move and be more efficient, we have to rely on and lean in with all of us that are still trying to make good government.
That's great. Sarah, do you have insights into where this has actually been used on the ground and improved performance or efficiency?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess one example of more recently that we have used Solonis and process mining generally, I'll say process mining generally, for the state of Oklahoma. And there's more about this use case, and there's actually a demo on Solonis's website if anybody wants to take a look. But basically, we had two main purposes. One was the procure to pay process. The other was they had about 122 entities that they needed to audit. And they only had 6 people on their team. And this was sort of like, we need to get it all done within 9 months. And, how are we going to do this? Look at the whole, purchasing process within all of these 122 entities. And so they used process mining to be able to kind of start looking at the purchase order process. They were looking for, potential spots for improvements, which is sort of misuse of exemption codes. Maybe they were looking at potentially sole sourcing. They were looking at contract leakages, things like that. But using process mining, because this kind of tool was sitting on top, they could get sort of like a real-time look at the data across all of these entities. And so about 12 weeks after getting sort of this tool up and running, they were able to review $4.5 billion of spending, and look at the potential risks associated with that based on the process changes that were happening. They were able to give recommendations that reduced procurement times from 110 days down to 46 days for these entities. And so this kind of overall ability to be able to do that by 6 people was something that they didn't think that they would be able to handle. And so in the past, what they used to do is they would hire or outsource this activity, bring on additional auditors to be able to perform this. And they estimated that usually cost around 11 to 12 million dollars for them, and these were savings that they could incur not having to pay for those, and they were able to finish all of this work in 4 months versus the 9 months that they needed. And so this is where, they were able to take a tool that, works well and is for the intended purpose of what they were exploring, and use it to be able to supplement and support their staff in being able to execute the work that they needed to perform. So it was extremely tangible, and like really got them kind of excited about thinking about how else can we like look at processes that are occurring, and where do we look at integrating some of these things in. And one of the things that we had like a lot of conversations with the state of Oklahoma about this is one of the things that we talked quite a bit about was, you know um, I think we talked a little bit about this before, like expectations and things that are kind of coming down the line. AI gets thrown out quite a bit. Everyone is like, we got to use AI to like somehow make everything work better. And so one of the things that Oklahoma has started thinking about is, we have our data, and now through process mining and process intelligence, we have clearer information about how does our operations run? What is our what do our operations look like end to end across our enterprise? And combining those two things provides enough context for any type of AI that they might want to implement on these backend processes. Before you had your data, you might feed it to some AI models, and you'll get a lot of hallucinations about sort of, this could occur or that could occur, or maybe you can help here. And a lot of the ways people have used AI is like they put chatbots on something, but there's not enough like context or information to make sure that the AI doesn't get, that gives you something meaningful that you can actually do something with. And so what they're finding is when they've kind of incorporated Copilot with sort of the outputs that they're getting from the process mining work that they're doing, it's providing better recommendations or thoughts about, if I did this in the future, how would that impact my process? So they can do some more modeling, or they can do some more thoughts about, how do I improve my KPI, like this metric that I'm trying to measure. So they sort of build a foundation, and now they're kind of going forward with that and being ready for sort of what are the expectations of the future. Um,
That's a great insight. I don't know if you saw AGA's CFO survey recently, but respondents basically said that uptake of AI was pretty low, and that expectations for its adoption likewise low.
mhm.
So the example you give is a real on the ground use case, I think, that could help accelerate adoption of what I think we'd all agree is game changing. We're starting to get some questions in the Q&A chat. Um, uh, one of which is about data, which you just touched on. So what strategies help with the data collection process? Teresa, talk about it during the pilot you observed. And Sairah, any other observations you have on data collection would be great.
I'm going to be candid and honest here. I was not the boots on the ground gathering the data, but I know it was a super painful process because I kept asking, "Are we ready to go on this pilot? Are we ready to go on
Yeah.
this pilot?" And it did take several months. I would say upwards of like 5 months. And part of it is just getting the focus of folks in the room that is willing to like give the data over, share it. I mean, that's just some of it is just, the human aspect of it as well. And also like they have other priorities, other things that they need to be working on, and then just getting all the right people in the room that is in agreement to it. So, I can attest, and Sarah probably knows better than I do of like what it takes to like, get the right data in. But I will say that I think, from a foundational standpoint, right? You have, like, what's the old saying, garbage in, garbage out. You
Mhm.
have to have good data. You have to have like that framework, that structure around having like, the information that has to feed into, the tool in order to get the analysis. So a lot of like, efficiency that we're talking about and throwing AI, like we're not going to gain efficiencies through technology if we aren't taking the time to really look at the foundation, right? Whether it's the data or the processes behind the thing that we're trying to get to. Process mining is a tool that can get us to those efficiencies, but there's still front end work that has to be done from an organization agency standpoint. Sarah, do you have anything to add?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I think this is very similar to any type of technology you would bring into an enterprise, right? You do have like and this is where, like Teresa, like you were mentioning about the relationship with your CIO office. You want to make sure the right security controls are in place, that the way that they're deploying whatever tool you're using, like it is fitting within the boundaries of your security controls and all of those things. Data owners are very sensitive about sharing their data 100%, and financial data obviously is one of the most sensitive. Procurement data is extremely sensitive. And that's where, any tool that you use that is related to process mining, like I had mentioned before, it takes three pieces of information. What is the activity being performed, the date, time, stamp, and sort of what is the actual like unique ID that's associated with it, like invoice number or purchase order number. And so these pieces are a little bit less sensitive than, actually getting the name of the vendor or, the total cost of the contract. And so there is an amount of time that you have to work with your data owners to make sure that they're comfortable with what information is getting pulled, where is it residing, how is it going to sit within the security boundaries of your organization. And I think Teresa was right on. Like that first part of those conversations, getting folks comfortable with what's happening, like that is the most time intensive part. Once the data is connected and you're able to see what you're seeing, that does not take very long. Like the technology itself works. It's the prep work that comes in the beginning that takes the time to be able to kind of see those things. I'll also say with those three pieces of information, there's a little bit of a less variation on the quality of the data. When you start getting into more depths about some of the KPIs or the measures, like what's the total number of dollars that are flowing through here? What's, when you start looking at other data and you start adding it in, then you do start getting a little bit less clean data. And so that's where you'll start having to have more conversations about if I see this, does this ID equal this ID? Like, why did someone put a zero in the front of this one and not put a zero in front of this one? Like those types of things, you will have to have those types of conversations to make sure that you are having a good output and you're capturing things accurately.
Probably an ancillary benefit to that, right? Cleaning up.
For sure. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So a related question we got is talk more about the digital twin. What is the purpose? What uses do you make of the digital twin?
Yeah. So
And
I guess the digital.
set the stage about what it is again.
Yeah, and so I use the word digital twin because I say it so much, but it's basically like a picture of what do your operations look like as a whole. Like Teresa was mentioning, they did one process, right? And if she was able to expand and use it across her enterprise of like, these are all the processes that we perform, and get the visualization of all of that and see where they kind of intersect with each other. That's sort of what, I meant by digital twin of your operations, and assigning measures at each step of the process kind of allows you to see what were the total number of requisitions that went through, how many purchase orders, what is the overall dollar value of, the receivables that we were recording. Those type of measures, like those kind of help you get a very kind of data look into your operations as a whole. And so that's what I meant by digital twin, of your operations to be able to see what is occurring in your operation so you can make good decisions about, hey, this process, we only do this once a year, and maybe only like 10 people go through this process. We should collapse this process and do this process instead, where like the majority of our folks do. So that those are the decisions you can kind of make based on looking at like sort of the digital twin of your process.
The one of the questions relates to what other related tools are there like this out there? We had a question about RPA and AI, but is this a proprietary process? Are there other or do other firms, organizations adopt this same process? Give us just sort of a view of the landscape of this kind of technology tool.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Teresa,
Teresa,
go
yeah.
ahead.
I know enough to be dangerous, and I don't know. I mean,
Go
we
for it.
did not use Solonis. UiPath was. I mean, I think there's different vendors out there that does similar. You know, I love my friends in CIO, but sometimes, you just work with whatever they will give you to get to where you want to be. And for us, we had
I love
UiPath
my
in the
friends there at
environment. And so we were able to work with some, things beyond RPA with them, that the CIO office was willing to work with us to pilot. We were always front runner in the CFO office. If you pilot anything, you will allow me to do. And so, but it just helps us learn and grow as an organization.
Yeah. So outside of like UiPath and Solonis, where I am, I've also heard of SAP has a solution that they have started kind of rolling out that kind of does the same type of process mining. I think UiPath and Solonis both are agnostic, meaning like you could go outside of the SAP environment and look at other systems. I've also heard recently that Microsoft is looking at in Access, trying to provide a similar type of capability. And so this is definitely like an area that's coming up more, with sort of like the more ability to be able to manage a lot of data and information at the same time. So Microsoft, I think, like I mentioned in Access, Signavio, which is the SAP piece, the UiPath, Celonis. Um, but again, do your research, look across what makes sense and what fits. You all know, like any type of technology, FedRAMP is extremely important. Making sure that you're kind of aligned with federal standards and regulations is important. So there are lots of things out there that can potentially be used, but you want to make sure that you're using something and understand sort of what is occurring. And that's, sort of the intention here, understanding what is process mining and like why it can be helpful and how it can be helpful.
I mentioned the CFO survey and slow adoption of AI. Can you give us your perception of uptake of these kinds of innovations in getting people's work done? I know this is a surprise question.
Robert always likes to throw in the surprise.
But you're both on the ground. You both got your ear to the ground. Any observations on that?
I feel like people are open to wanting to try technology to support the work that they're doing, especially right now, like you were mentioning before, right? Like the tight budgets are always occurring. I think it's sort of more the loss of experience and knowledge that's occurred over the past year that's kind of made people more open or accepting of wanting to try additional tools. But I also think there's sort of like the looming, how is AI going to actually help? All of those things are sort of, you know, they're making folks open to wanting to try to see how do we get to a point where we can actually drive meaning out of AI that's coming. I feel like a lot of leadership at a lot of agencies is, at least from the conversations that I've had, open to wanting to try this. And so there's, and we do this, but others do this as well, like proof of concepts, things of that, to see how it can work, see if it's meaningful or brings value that it does before you even get to the point of trying AI. And right now, I think that's sort of where government is right now. Like, take the first step of identifying how do we know what we're doing, and then at that point, then let's get to the point of, okay, now how is AI going to actually help my workforce? How will they help them do their jobs better?
Teresa,
Yeah.
do you
No,
have a question here? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, I think, as I mentioned before, and as, we all know, with having so many people gone in the federal government, the intent is to create efficiency and rely on technology to fill that gap. But there's a process that you have to go along the way, right? That efficiency hasn't been created yet. But I do think that, given the circumstances, I'm a glass half full type person, right? And so regardless of the situation, we do have the opportunity right now where the door, I feel like, is open more, and more receptive to allowing different tools and technology in the federal environment than, maybe you would have it before, right? A lot of times we'll end up in pilot purgatory, right? So, I can do this pilot and we can, work through it for, 2 to 3 years. But I may not be able to get anything else in my environment to move forward and for another process, right? So now I think that opportunity where, we could do a faster pace, more instead of just pilots, we could either have more of those pilots going on at the same time in parallel, or, we're able to really test it, see that it works, and then move forward at a, we may fail, but at least, we're able to like continue to move forward for results. And that's kind of like the end that I think this administration is looking for, is like, I want to see results and I don't want to wait, 5, 6 years to get those results. And, from my standpoint, I don't think that we can get to those expectations without being a little bit more agile and open to the different tools and technologies that are out there. But we also, as feds, know that, you have to understand the processes and the complexity behind it to create those efficiencies. And so that's where you have to have that balance of, the people along with the technology in order to create the efficiency, because at the end of the day, you're going to have that human and expert in the room to really be able to drive the change and create the efficiency. It's not going to just happen because you have AI or, whatever the
Right.
tool is.
I'm going to ask this question. I'm not sure I totally understand it. Could you talk more about scaling tools for smaller entities or smaller processes? Either of you get that question?
I think so.
Well, that you're ahead of me.
Typically,
You're ahead of me.
well, well, typically when you scale, you're moving to larger. So I'm assuming they're talking about how useful would something like this be for a smaller entity versus or a smaller process, um, or moving from smaller to larger. So I think when you would initially try something like this out, if you were doing a proof of value or something, you would first, pick a process, but it's not just about the process. Like you want to answer three questions. You want to answer like pick three questions that are meaningful to you in doing a proof of concept or proof of value. And it could be easy as, what is the root cause of um, of our requisitions being delayed, or something along the lines of like, what are three questions that you want to answer out of this process, not just to process map for the sake of
Right,
process mapping.
right.
And so once you've kind of established what those things are, and you start with that initial process and you answer those types of questions, then you can kind of look at scaling and adding more processes or other corresponding processes or questions and seeing how you can expand beyond that initial like process. I'm hoping I answered that question, because I think that's what the intent was.
I'm going to say that was fantastic. So,
Okay.
uh,
I'm gonna go with it
what about, and
too.
are there certain areas that auditors should focus on in reviewing process mining, like what data was used in it, or compare actuals to models?
Yeah, so like again, you want to start with questions about your operations. And this is, I think auditors do this well. I mean, at least, so I didn't mention this earlier, but 8 years at GAO, where I was doing auditing of IT operations around the government. You have a set of questions that you're looking to accomplish. And that should be what is a driver for where you're looking to process model. And that can come in various forms. So when you do process mining and you get sort of this digital twin of your operations, um, you take there's a thing called process adherence mapping. So you can be like, this is what my process should look like, and this is what it's actually looking like. And then you can do like a matchup of like where are the exceptions occurring. So that is one way. The other way is, there's certain metrics that an agency wants to hit. So one of the pieces that we're working on right now is with the state of Georgia. The big beautiful bill says there are um, metrics that a state needs to meet in order to not incur a fine related to payment errors for federal funds that they receive, like TANF funds, Medicaid funds. And so the state of Georgia is actually using us to be able to look at their process of when they receive these federal funds. How do they, identify who's receiving those funds, and sort of what do their payment errors look like? And I think the marker is like they have to be within 6%. Their payment error rate needs to be within 6% in order to incur a fine. And so you're using process mining to look at that process end to end, and identify that, they're a little bit over. And so now these are the processes, and I'm using this as an example, and this is the part of the processes that they need to go and fix in order to be able to get to that 6%. And so that's sort of like a way to be able to kind of define what you're doing. But again, you're starting with there's a business metric or a question I'm trying to answer, and that's sort of what the process is helping me um, get to.
Okay, we're running out of time. This has been a great conversation. What piece of advice would you offer our colleagues as they begin their process intelligence journey? Teresa, let's start with you.
I would say leadership support. I mean, I think you have to have tone at the top and the buy-in, and an executive champion to, move it forward, to keep it going, and making sure that, that collaboration across the C-suite is happening. And then I would also say that having some sort of like innovation team or resource to help support driving the change, because a lot of times, in my experience, people have a job to do, and they probably have 10 times more things to do now with, so many people gone. You don't really have time to sit back and think about like, how could I improve this process, or how can I implement the thing that I know about, regardless, they say you get this in your environment and you want to drive the change, like having the time to make that change in the process. So having that group of experts that can help identify those opportunities for improvement improvement, and, be the boots on the ground to like, make this better so that they can hand it over and say, okay, we fixed this and now that this is, a new approach or whatever. And then a lot of what we've talked about is just leveraging technology to the extent possible. I think this is a great opportunity. Robert, you and I have talked about, automating something like, good over bad. If you don't understand your process and you're trying to automate something that isn't a good process to begin with, the example I always like to use is, depreciation expense, where we were reconciling the depreciation, yet the system was doing it. And, for various reasons that for time's sake, I won't explain, but, it was a good idea at the time, but, decades later, if you're not seeing differences between what the system's producing and the team is reconciling manually, maybe we don't need to do that anymore. And so is that something I could have automated? Absolutely. But, does it make sense to really eliminate it versus automate it? And so I think like, just making sure that, you have the opportunity to use technology, but you're mindful of understanding your processes and getting that foundational piece right and understanding that end to end. And, there's technology out there obviously now that can really do that for you at a faster rate. So
Great. Sairah, we're out of time, but I'll give you
Yeah,
the
no, I mean, Teresa hit it nail on the head.
Okay. You're both fantastic. Thank you for your time this morning, for getting us revved up, generally speaking, but particularly on process intelligence. Thank you most importantly for your service to the nation, because the mentorship, the example you give for others just can't be measured. So thanks for your time.